Hello everyone, Reza here and welcome to my channel. In this video, I will walk you through all the basics in Adobe Substance 3D Sampler and how to use this application if you're using it for the first time, or maybe you do know the interface, but you probably don't know what this application has to offer. So without any further ado, let's get started. Now you might be asking, what is Substance 3D Sampler? This application allows you to create material collection, either by tweaking and mixing what you already have, the material that is already on your hard drive, you tweak that, you polish that, you make it ready to be exported, or when you want to create or extract new materials from your scans, with single or multiple images, so it's great for photogrammetry. Also, when you want to create a texture yourself from scratch, so you take the camera out, you take some photos and you would like to make them tieable, you would like to generate maps out of it, you can do that easily in Substance 3D Sampler. Back in the day, Photoshop was my to-go application, but with the release of Substance 3D Sampler, you produce a higher quality result while you save a lot of time. So in my opinion, if you're interested in texturing or you want to be a texture artist, knowing Substance 3D Sampler is a no-brainer. And that's the aim of this tutorial. Now let's start with the application and kind of familiarize ourselves with the user interface. This is what you typically get, a welcome window. I don't have any project open. I'm going to go and create new for the very first time. Starting from the top, you have application menu bar, file, edit, window, help, and license. And surprisingly, there is not much in there. If I go to file or if I go to edit, I've got only undo and redo, and that can be quite misleading. You may say to yourself, well, is that it? So that's all we can do with the edit menu. A lot actually is going on, but in my opinion, application menu bar is not the most useful menu. So let's explore more and see what else do we have here. We have two menus, one on the left hand side, another one is on the right hand side. The menu on the left hand side is in charge of translating your material. The bar on the right hand side is in charge of exporting and sharing. So these two that you will use throughout the project, chances are this one you use right at the end when you finish with your project. Now the main brain of what's going on is in this section right here, where you have a project, asset, and then within asset you can just collapse and expand and get access to sub menus, mainly material and filter. Now on the bottom left, we have three important panels. We have the viewer panel, which I can actually collapse some of these tabs, so again you see what's going on. The global parameter allows you to adjust your preferred renderer, and that has something to do with what version you're using, what graphics card you have, so on and so forth. Tiling allows you to offset your texture. By default, I'm not going to touch that. I will show you a much better way of tiling. Mesh is what you see in here, the default mesh. Remember that what we aim for is how the material looks like on our model. So if the material that you're creating is suitable for flat surfaces, then probably it would be a good idea to pick plane to begin with. But if you think, for example, you aim for a fabric, then maybe having a t-shirt geometry would be a much better choice, or even cloth. But again, we have different base meshes to choose from. We have sphere, cube with beveled edges, cylinder, and cylinder with round edges, of course t-shirt, some organic models, and again these two guys that you know. I'm going to just leave that as just a simple plane, because what I'm aiming for is just to bring everything onto a clean canvas so you guys can see what's going on. On the right hand side, we have layer and we have properties, and these are there's nothing on them until we actually go and bring a material into the scene. Then we can put them on a layer and see their properties. We get into that in a second. And now the next rollout is environment. So you have few HDR images to choose from. Obviously, HDR images come with their own color, so you can see we get a great with a little bit of tint here and there. If I just switch to, let's say, this little guy, the preview, you can see that we can actually make use of different HDR images and get a better understanding of our lighting setup. A very, very useful hotkey is shift right click and drag to left and right, so you can adjust your lighting if you want, which is very useful. At least for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm not going to go with any outdoorsy sort of HDR image. I'm just going to stay within a neutral color, which is mainly a studio HDRI. Now, if I scroll down, you can see I can actually see the image if I tick this box. Bit of a distraction, but again, if you really want to see what's going on, you can definitely turn it on. Again, don't forget, shift right mouse button to left and right adjusts your light. You can rotate it this way, exactly does the same thing, and you can increase the brightness, decrease the brightness if you want that. If you feel like you just need a little bit more light information to see what your material looks like, you can definitely do that. I'm going to collapse material and go to camera. There's not much in there really. You have perspective, which is great because it gives you perspective, but sometimes you have something like plane and you basically want to see it without having any perspective or distortion. In that case, you switch to orthographic. So there is no lens distortion and you can just investigate and observe your material that way. You can of course change the field of view and get a less distorted or more distorted angle of view if you want. But again, I tend to leave this as 55, and that gives me a really kind of neutral, normal looking camera. I'm going to go to environment and turn off the visibility for now because to me it's a bit distracting. Also, I'm just going to scroll up and in here pick this Studio 06 that has got enough illumination for me, and that gets the job done. So that was a quick look at viewer setting. Let's have a look at shader setting and see what we find there. Now in shader setting, there are a few things that you can kind of play around with. First things first is if you have details and if you think there will be kind of raised areas and areas with recession, then probably you want to kind of increase that sample a little bit so the shadows that you're getting in is noise free. It's mainly for display purposes so you could get to see things better. Also, we have a shadow as well, which is very useful. Probably on a flat surface it's not really visible, so I'm just going to go in here and pick probably this little guy and then switch to shader setting, and now you can see that I can actually enable or disable shadow, and again shift right mouse button to left and right to adjust my shadow. You can do the exact same thing by going here and click on this button to enable or disable shadow if you want. Very, very handy. I rarely go into shader settings rollout. I always enable, disable my shadows here. And of course you have material parameters, and this is basically defines your basic material. As an analogy, if you're a Maya user, it actually defines what you see in Lambert 1, and I rarely touch that because I have a tendency to create my own default material And the last one actually shows you what you want, what sort of pass you would like to get out of your material. Would you like to have access to base, normal, roughness, metallic, height, and so on and so forth. So if you, for example, deal with plastic and you know that you're not going to have any metalness or any conductive material, then you can probably go in here and turn off metallic. It just makes the scene file a bit smaller and much easier to run the project on your system if you're not dealing with a super powerful workstation. I'm going to leave this on. So that's a quick look at these 3 settings and the setting option in general. Now let's start with our project tab. So I'm just going to click in here to make this channel setting disappear. In the material tab, you can actually create different sets of materials and import your own materials and have little mini package within the project that you have. You can click on this plus sign and bring in new material, create a new material, and that gives you a clean tab to work with. I don't use it. I usually focus on the current material, save it, and then if I were to create another one, I just create a new file. Then you have environment light, which uses what it's already been set in this scene, but you can certainly go ahead and create a new environment light as well and just adjust your own custom lighting setup. Again, I don't do that because I use lighting to tweak my materials, not the other way around. So I'm going to click on this plus and this plus to get rid of these 2. Moving to probably the most important rollout, and that is assets. Now you have 2 types of assets. The one that you have already on your hard drive, either you have purchased them, you've downloaded them, you used them in the past and you save them as archive, and the one that 3D Sampler offers and you can just have them for free and use them and test them. So if I click on this starter asset arrow once, that takes me to the main page, if I may, where you can use the starter package, starter assets, free assets that 3D Sampler offers, or your own assets. So if I go to starter asset, I have materials, dielectric conductive material, and then if I scroll down, I get to see about 70 something filters that I can use. I will show you how to use them as well. So that's what a 3D Sampler offers. So if I want to apply this material to this geometry, all I need to do is to just simply drag and drop. I'm going to go to viewer settings, scroll down, and I'm probably going to change that to the preview model. To orbit around, just holding down Alt, left mouse button to kind of orbit, Alt, middle mouse button to move the camera, and Alt, right mouse button to zoom in and zoom out, and you can use a scroller as well. Again, if you're a Maya user, it's pretty much the same thing. Shift, right mouse button, drag to left just to adjust my light a little bit, and I'm going to go to intensity and ever so slightly increase the intensity of my HDR light. All right, back to our starter asset. All I need to do is just to select the material that you want and drag and drop onto the model. Done. Now, if you feel like, okay, I've got an 8K material and I won't be able to see it clearly, you can just go in here and increase width and height of your map. So what you see, the representation of the material, is going to be a much higher quality. Now, the good thing about these materials, they actually come with a set of presets as well. So now you can see that that material is on a layer, and that layer, the name is actually the name of the material. If you look at the properties, you, for some of them, not for all of them, you have presets, and you have basic parameters to change those presets. So it's already been made for you. You don't need to do much about it. You can kind of click on them and see how they change. Again, you can go into the resolution and pick a much higher resolution just to show you the contrast. I can go to 128 and you can see all of a sudden everything looks very pixelated, or I can go all the way to 4K, a little bit of processing time, but of course I can get to see all the details, which is pretty cool. We can turn off the shadow to see things more clearly, but that's the kind of representation that you are getting. You can actually click on this button here to switch from 3D to 2D, or see both of them in your layout. So that's the material on a 3D object, and that's the 2D material by itself. Now, the beauty of this is you kind of get to see different channels of that material as well. So normal, roughness, all the way to ambient, occlusion, and all of them are tweakable, so you can actually polish them. And that's probably where you use most of these buttons. For example, it's very simple. As soon as you click on that crop becomes a modifier and places itself on the layer. So if I click on this, all of a sudden you have crop modifier, and you can actually go in here and crop your image. You can see the live feedback on the left hand side as well. And the good thing about this is it's very non-destructive. So it's not like, okay, you crop the image and if you change your mind later on, you have to kind of backpedal and find where you were and redo all these steps. No, it's just a node on a layer. You turn it on and turn it off if you don't want to. At any point of time, you can get rid of it by clicking on this remove a layer button. Very intuitive, very easy to use. You have the same situation with perspective. So if I click on perspective, it's really good if you have a camera and you go out and you try to kind of take a photo, but again, you're on an angle and you get a little bit of perspective and you have a little bit of skew in your image. You don't need to tweak it in Photoshop, just bring it here, drop in a perspective transform and just fix the transform this way and basically tweak your image. Very effective, again, very non-destructive. Even if you're inaccurate right now and you realize it, I don't know, half an hour from now, you can always go back and just tweak it. Simple as that. And of course, the next one is transform. You can have that transform here. You can go into position offset and basically offset your model in horizontal, vertical, flip it horizontally and flip it vertically. Very convenient. And usually for all of these nodes, you always have an advanced parameters where it goes actually one level into macro details and things that you can change on a normal day you wouldn't, but it gives you extra layer of control over the tools that you're picking to adjust your image. We have a clone stamp tool as well, and that if you are familiar with application packages like Photoshop, that's exactly how this works. Left and right bracket to increase and decrease that, right? And then you hold down shift and click to pick a sample, and then you start painting the area that you want to paint. You can see on the right hand side, it actually shows how I sample from one area and I go to another sample. Probably I need to reduce my resolution to 2K. That's much better. So that's how you use clone sample. Again, you have threshold where you actually adjust the area that you have changed. You can blur that area if you want. You can smooth that area to remove all the seams. And of course, the precision is the accuracy. Always set that to 1. At any point of time, if you realize that it was a bad idea, you go and hide it. Absolutely fantastic. So you can see it's very, very intuitive, very easy to use, very easy to understand. Now let's talk about layers and the functionality of the layers a little bit, and put together a very, very simple example on how we can use layers in conjunction with some filters. Now I'm going to go to viewport setting, scroll down and pick a plane, because what I want to do, I want to use what it's been offered by 3D Sampler and create a pavement with dry leaves on it, right? So we start with a clean slate. Now, if I go to layer, I actually need to have a base material. I need a base coat, base material to start with. Now you've got a lot of different materials at your disposal. I'm just going to go with a rock material. So I'm just going to go and type in a rock and just drag and drop a rock material in there. Now by default, this rock material doesn't look, you know, amazing. It's just a normal rock material. What is good about this is the level of control that you've been given right off the bat. So I'm just going to click on this and kind of reduce the coloration of it. I'm aiming for a sort of dark pavement. So that should work for me. Now, if you want to have variation or wear and tear on striation, you can always have that by increasing the stone color variation. You can have that polish and make it brand new, but I actually want to do the opposite because it's an exterior scene, let's say, and you want the material for an exterior scene. So you actually need that. Little bit of gain to add more macro detail is always helpful. And of course, you can increase or decrease the roughness. We will get to that. What we probably don't want to use ever is to actually introduce metalness to this, unless you want to change this from stone to metal and use the pattern as damage or rust, right? So you can kind of hack the situation, but I'm actually genuinely looking for a stone, so metallic doesn't really play any role in here. So that's that. But the next question is, how will I be able to kind of create that grid-like stone, something like pavement that I want? Well, as the name suggests, all I need to do is to look for a pavement in the filter. So if I click on the add layer, I have access to probably over 70 filters, and some of them are awesome. Obviously, if I were to go over all of them, I need one day and I have maybe 45 minutes. So I'm just going to cut to the chase and just look for things that I need. Now I search for pavement. Voila, simple as that. Very happy with what I have already, but of course I would like to go and make some changes. So the first change I would like to make is the edge roundness. Probably what you want to do is set the edge roundness to 0. Brick spacing, if you want to have unusually wide space between the bricks, you can do that. I want the opposite. For the random elevation intensity, I actually do want to do that to create some sort of imperfections. If I kind of zoom in, you can probably see better. This is very clean and neat, but this is imperfect, and that's kind of what I want. Now I can go to pattern and change the pattern if I want. This works well for me, but you can definitely go with different patterns. For example, Flander waves is also another very kind of common look. Brush rock is another very common look that you see in parks, and it has a really nice level of randomness to it. But I'm gonna go with the European fan type that I want to. Now, what I really want to do is to kind of reduce the amount of cement in between each brick, and that can be done by going into joint and change the level of that a little bit. So you can see I can kind of reduce that just a tad. You can change the width if you want. You can change the variation of it, so part of it gets more, some part of it gets less, and of course luminosity where it gets darker, and that kind of makes sense because this kind of pavement been used and abused by rain, by dust, and by sun, so you don't want that to be sort of brand new looking, glowing type of cement. So that kind of works really well, and I'm kind of happy with that. But again, when you have something like this in real life, it's not just rocks and cement. You always have, I don't know, leaves on it, you have mud and dirt on it. So let's add layers. It's an opportunity for us to actually explore different avenues and kind of see how we can blend different layers together. I'm just going to increase that to 4K, so I would like to see how this works for me. Yeah, that definitely looks better. I can also go to this displacement, and I didn't really talk about this, but that's a very, very useful button that we have here. It allows you to kind of tweak the displacement live, so I can kind of change that displacement on the fly. You can see that I'm already adding a lot of irregularities and adding more severe displacement to this. That is probably way too much, but you can actually do that if you want. So I'm going to set it to 0.3, just so you know. 0 is going to zero everything out. I'm going to probably aim for 0.3. Quality probably 0.5 will do. You can go to 1. You don't want to overdo this, so I'm actually going to keep it as 0.5, and 0.3 for displacement gets the job done. Now let's go back and add more layers to this. Now I would like to add a mud on top of this pavement. That's easy. I'm just going to search for mud, and you can bring it into here, and that will be added onto the scene that you have, but I have a tendency to actually go in here and just drop it in there. And the beauty of that is it actually comes with the blend node, the height blend node, which I love. So you actually don't need to be worried about, oh, what am I gonna do with the mask? Do I need to create that mask? No, actually you don't need to. It comes with a smart type of mask where it allows you to kind of tweak the distribution of the mud as you go, and a 3D sampler calls it height blend. So this is a blend node that comes with any additional layer that you put on top of your base layer. Now probably first thing I want to do is to kind of browse around and look at the offset and see how much offset I want. Do I want this to cover the entire sort of ground, or do you want that to be sort of well controlled here and there sort of situation? Now you can kind of have that as how thick you want it, so that can be defined using contrast, and of course you have blend opacity to see how opaque the material is. I can go to height adjustment and just change the height of it. Usually I'm going to kind of keep it around 0.8, 0.9. Now once you're done with this, I think it would be a good time to go to the actual mud, and I'm going to change this color to a much darker color. That's a really fresh looking soil rather than mud, and I don't want that color, so I'm just going to go and really darken that a little bit, so it's more of a muddy look, not a fresh soil look. Now here's the part that I really enjoy the most, where you can, with a single slider, you can just turn that to a wet surface. By just killing the roughness. You can actually do the same thing in here, scroll down and just change the stone roughness to 0, and all of a sudden you feel like it's just rained and everything is wet. And the beauty of that is actually, whoa, that's way too much. And the beauty of that is you can actually have that as part of your maps. So you can go into roughness map, and that roughness map actually reflects the wetness that you see in here, which is pretty cool. Now I'm going to bring this one back to where it was. By the way, if you want to reset, you can just as you can see, if I'm moving away, moving the cursor away and bring it back, you get the reset. You can actually reset it this way if you want to reset. But again, that's what I like about 3D Sampler. It's just very intuitive, very simple to use. I'm just going to bring the roughness up a little bit. We don't want this to be fully dry. At the same time, we don't want that to be completely wet. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and just have a look and see what type of result I'm getting. Yep, that looks good. Now let's add more into this. I'm just going to bring in another filter that I use a lot, and that filter is called Scatter. And that is very useful to scatter items on top of the current layer. Now, it doesn't know what to scatter. You actually specify what to scatter. So I'm going to go in here into my asset, and I say, all right, I want to scatter dry leaves. Drag and drop. And you have dry leaves. Simple as that. So remember, you're not really just limited by what you have here. You can bring any type of material in here, external material, the way that I just showed you, and use it in your own projects. Now I'm gonna look at some of the presets. For example, dry leaves like that. I think that's kind of more realistic, and that's kind of what I want. You can have a range, a min and max range, and I'm going to reduce the resolution. I always get too excited and increase the resolution, but that's much better now. Everything is loading nicely, and that gives you a really nice random range where the distribution is reasonable and even. That's good. But sometimes you look at this and you think to yourself, wouldn't that be nice to just bump up the saturation a little bit, you know, color grade it while I have this map in making. I don't want to do it after the fact, bring it to Photoshop again. I would like to get everything done in here. No problem at all. You can always go in here, add a layer, and you can just type in hue saturation. And there you have another layer on top. The beauty of this is you can change the color information, which in this case just crazy. You don't want to do that, but you can bump up the saturation a little bit and bring a little bit of life to this. You can change the lightness as well. You can go all the way crazy and colorize it, which we don't want. I'm going to reduce that just a tad. 0.05 is a better value, and all of this is somewhat procedural, so you can at any point of time say, no, I don't like the amount of kind of joint and cement that I have in here. I'm just going to go into joint, and I am going to sort of reset what I have here just to get more of that. I'm going to sort of reduce the variation to get more even sort of material in there, but I want to reduce its coloration a little bit so it's not as white. There you go. You know, in no time at all, you can go and make those changes, and it kind of gets the job done. Again, you can tile via this. You can go in here and say, all right, how about tiling? I want to go 5 by 5, and all of a sudden you get a tile. If the project asks for it, we can even reduce it to a much bigger texture if you want. We talked about displacement. You can go all the way to a very high number. You can see this bit is now much higher than the other part. All right, we have one topic left, and that is how to export what we have as an image, how to create different maps, and how to export them. Before doing that, I highly encourage you to kind of go into the filter and explore a little bit more. For example, moss is one of my favorite filters, obviously not applicable in here, but if you ever want to create vegetation, that's a fantastic filter to be added. Crack is another one which is really good. If you want to use a cracked window, you can definitely use that. Actually, one that I can use on this one is dirt. Although we had dirt material, you can create dirt filter, and bam, it makes everything kind of old and rusty and weary. I can go into dry leaves and go all the way down and kind of change the intensity a little bit to a much smaller intensity. You can add randomness, change its size, so on and so forth, so that's better. So yeah, dirt is actually a very good one that you can use. It brings more grime and dirt into your environment. And again, if you would like to know how it's going to look like as your color map, you can always select on this 2D and look at your base color map and zoom in and see how it looks and make changes if you want. If you think it's too sort of dark, you can always go in here and bring in brightness and contrast and just add more brightness and contrast to it. Remember that what you see here has been affected by the light, but this is the actual color that you see, so make sure that this is the right map, what you want. There are again tons of filters in here available to you to make use of. And once it's done, once everything is finished, you can just easily go into this button here and go share. If you have Substance Painter installed, then you can click on this, and that creates a smart material out of what you have, which is amazing. So you can kind of save that as a smart material, and every time you want to use a pavement, you use this very material that you just made in 3D Sampler and use it in Substance Painter. If you want to bring it out and just directly into 3D software packages, you can go export as, and you can sort of name it, give it a path, destination, give this a resolution. So I would say a minimum of 2K all the way to 4K would be good, and then see what you want. So base you want, definitely for some renderers like RenderMan, diffuse is something that you want. Normal, roughness, definitely. Metallic, I don't think for this particular example you need it. You can export it, but it will have no data in it. And then you have height and you have ambient occlusion, and there's so much more that you can just extract out of this, which is priceless. So as you can see, this application is capable of producing high quality work in no time at all. Obviously a lot needs to be covered still. It's just a quick start, a brief introduction to the application and how this application works. Its workflow was the main topic of this video. I will create another video to show you a different way of using 3D Sampler to your advantage, where you bring your own photos as opposed to using a starter pack or a ready-to-go smart material. Alright, we reached the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. Find me on Patreon and Twitter. I hope you found this video useful. Until the next one, see you guys later.